Thank you for joining us today for this webinar series, Photovoice Elements and Community-Based Programming. We're joined here with Diana Nazareth, and we're excited to have her share her work and expertise today. So Photovoice Worldwide is really about training, consulting, products, and community. And so this community portion is what we're doing here today, joining people, researchers, practitioners, artists, psychologists, sociologists, anyone who's interested in arts-based methods and using arts-based methods in their work. So we're happy to offer this webinar series as part of what we do, and really bringing community together and gathering around different topics to encourage conversation, encourage learning. Keep the conversation going with us afterwards. Please follow us on social media and continue to, engage with us and help us learn and educate each other. So Photovoice Basics, as you probably know, developed by Carolyn Wong and Marion Burris in the early 90s. It's a participatory action research method where cameras are put into the hands of participants. And participants are asked to share their point of view, their experiences, how they're dealing with particular issues by taking photos, writing captions, talking with others, and then exhibiting their work. So here's a Photovoice path that was developed by my colleague, Laura Lorenz, and really outlines the steps of Photovoice. And in many cases, after reflecting and moving forward, you may go back to the beginning. This may spur additional Photovoice projects, and so you start over from the beginning. And for today, we are joined by Diana, and we're so excited. She took one of our courses and graciously offered to provide this webinar for us today. She's the founder of Project Kids and Cameras, so check out her website and you'll hear more about. I will not give her a long introduction because I know she has an introduction and a lot planned for today, but we're really excited that Diana can be here with us and share about her work and her experience using photos and photography and community-based programming. So welcome, Diana, and thank you so much for being here.
Sorry about that. You should, by now, I should know to unmute when I'm speaking. Thank you so much. I'm really happy to be here and to share a presentation that I prepared for you. It's nice. I see some familiar faces, so that's really nice. I would like to maybe just ask if I can briefly, for those of you that are, or I'd like to know who is new to Photovoice. So if you would like to unmute yourself and let me know, or if you want to put it in the chat, maybe you could even just tell me, if you've practiced Photovoice before, or if you're completely new to it. I'm just curious, more out of curiosity for myself, and also Paul. Yeah, hi Paula. Okay. Okay. All right. Well, okay. I see, Michelle, that you're a student in photography. Okay, that's great. And Incy, is that okay? I see you used Photovoice in your research. Okay. And Sherry, you have some experience in First Nation communities. Okay, yeah, I'd love to hear about that as well. Hey, hi, Michael. You're new as well. Okay, that gives me sort of a good sense. And the reason I ask is that, I have been using Photovoice Elements in my work with communities and with children for more than a few years now. but sometimes I feel very new to it in the sense that I don't use Photovoice for research purposes. And so that's a distinction that I will try to make clear as I go through my presentation. What I've done is I basically cull a lot of the elements of Photovoice that I feel have really strengthened my practice as a photo educator and as a teaching artist, primarily or initially working with children, but now increasingly working with many other communities. And so I continue to I try to hone my Photovoice skills and, so that I can continue to strengthen my program in those, in very diverse communities. Okay, so with that, what I'll do is I will share my screen and pull up the presentation that I have for you. And also, so here you can see that what I will be speaking very specifically about are the elements of Photovoice that I use in my practice. So let me just bring you, Stephanie told you a little bit about myself. And as she mentioned, I work primarily with children, but like I said, increasingly Photovoice actually has allowed me, or my practice of Photovoice has allowed me to work increasingly with many other communities. And that's of great interest to me and the work that I do. I hope that you visit my website if you want to learn more about some of the communities that I worked with and some of and my approaches, which I will outline here for you. Okay, so yes, so today, I believe we're together for about an hour. I'm going to try to maybe just speak for 30 minutes, 35 minutes, so that, or maybe 30 minutes, so that we have some time to have a discussion. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. That said, I'm also happy to answer any questions that you have along the way. So it's a style that I prefer. So if you want to stop me, please do. And you have any specific questions that maybe you don't want to wait until the end to ask, yeah, please just raise your hand, or just, I don't think there's too many of us in this group, so you could even just unmute yourself and ask me the question. So what I'd like to talk about today is the following things that you see here in front of you. I want to just give you some insight into how I collaborate with community agencies. And those agencies are often local service arts organizations, and that's how we refer to them here in Toronto. So we have a number of local arts service organizations that are funded primarily by the City of Toronto, and I work with quite a few of them. But a community agency could be really anything. It could be a community arts center, a library, a school. It could be a coalition of some sort. So yes, and so I also want to share with you how I sort of establish my program goals and objectives, and how Photovoice, the elements of Photovoice help me to do that. How do they help me establish my goals? You know, what am I looking for? How do I assess even sort of the impact that my program may be having? Or how do I help the community agencies that I work with? How do I help them measure the impact of the program? And this is something that I never thought I would ever be doing. When I decided that I wanted to teach, I just thought I would just teach photography. But there are so many other elements that are involved when you work with community in terms of, evaluating and assessing, the worth or the value of a program. And then along with that, I will also sort of take you step by step in terms of how I sort of organize my program around taking, discussing, and exhibiting participants' work and photographs. Okay, so let's move forward. So I I love this quote, and I thought I would just share this quote with you because, you know, it really is a quote or a sentiment that has really guided and inspired and influenced my work as a photography educator. And so this quote is, as you can read here, the illiterate of the future will be the person ignorant of the camera as well as of the pen. And, you know, I have found that, oops, sorry, I found that that this is really what helps inform this quote, this sentiment really helps shape and form my work. And what I love about the photo voice is that there are so many sort of entry points in which your participants can not only learn the basic camera skills that they need to take pictures, but also sort of imbue sort of the meaning that comes along with taking pictures in the interpretation as well. And I strongly believe that, maybe it's probably apparent to all of us here, that it's not really good enough just to be literate, like in traditional literacy. You really do have to be literate in terms of, you know, visual literacy. That's almost, and who knows, maybe in the future, it seems like it's almost more important to be able to really interpret, to view and to interpret images and to decipher what they mean to you, right? Or even to decipher what the intention is behind a particular image or imagery. Okay, so let's move forward here. Okay, so why consider using Photovoice Elements? What are the values of participatory photography? So I've sort of outlined them here, and I'm thinking, Stephanie, these will be made available to everybody if they want to refer to this in the future. But so basically, why have I considered using Photovoice Elements? And I've sort of outlined them here for you. So first and foremost, I have found that Photovoice or participatory photography definitely increases student engagement or participant engagement, increases a sense of personal and collective self. And we'll talk about that synergy between personal and collective self when we're working in a group. It certainly helps to amplify the voice of participants, and in many different ways. It depends on your program and what you hope to do. So we can talk about that as well. It also, like, practically, it's designed to give cameras to participants. So your participants may not always have equipment or cameras to work with. So I feel that one of the key components of Photovoice is actually to provide that equipment, or at least cameras, to the participants, to give them access to something that they may not have access to. And then ultimately, to give your participants some skills that they can use. I mean, this is important for me because I work with a lot of young, people and youth, is just to sort of give them some skills that they can apply in other areas of their life. Okay, and please, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask me. Okay, so, and Stephanie, if you could kind of keep an eye on the clock for me too, so if I'm talking too much, please let me know. Okay, so what I've done to continue to give you an overview of my work as, in community, is I've outlined here my approach, my philosophy as an educator, as a photography educator working in community. And then what I try to do is sort of pair it with the Photovoice element that I feel correlates and complements my approach. Okay, so I think it's important for you to know why you're doing what you're doing, and to know how you want to do it. So I'm sharing with you some of the key sort of concepts of my approach. And so, for example, the first one is my belief that kids learn differently, right? So you may be aware of the theory of multiple intelligences and the social and emotional development that comes along, you know, or that is present with, you know, cognitive development. And so I feel that because Photovoice is so participatory in nature, that it allows for people of very various abilities to learn the way that they like to learn, the way that they are compelled to learn. And so I feel that Photovoice Elements actually supports and supports that environment when you're working with people from or individuals of very various abilities, even various levels of motivation. Okay, so the second one is that I believe that kids learn better in an environment of low stress and high challenge. And we can use kids interchangeably with actually anybody of any age. And so because Photovoice is so collaborative also in nature and very objective driven, it's like a perfect pairing for me, because you get the collaboration that reduces the stress in when you're working with people. But it also, there's a very specific project. Like I like to work, most of my programs are very project driven, which means that we come together for a specific reason and we work towards that specific reason. And so whether that's like a photo exhibit that's going to be part of maybe a larger community photo exhibit, then we all know from the beginning that we have some goals that we have to achieve. And the challenge is embedded in that, in that objective. Okay, so if I'm going too fast, please let me know as well. Okay, so kids, I also believe that kids need to sort of stretch and explore. And when I say that, I mean that if you provide an environment, a workshop environment for your participants where they can sort of play with things, play with ideas, they can, you know, learn from each other as well, right? That's something that's very important for me. And the element that I feel, the Photovoice element that I feel really complements that is the fact that in Photovoice, there's a lot of brainstorming that happens amongst the facilitator and the participants. So we brainstorm because maybe you're working with a community and you want them to be very invested in whatever, in the theme or in the objective. So I feel that there's a lot of Photovoice elements that help support that brainstorming and that theme development, especially when you're working like collectively in a group. And we'll talk a little bit about that. Also, kids learn by doing, or people learn by doing. That experiential, that whole notion of experiential learning, I am very much a believer in. I've seen it firsthand, and I'm sure many of you have as well. So, you know, by learning by doing, you know, we're strengthening our critical thinking skills, sometimes even our motor skills, depending on like what community we're working with. And so the thing I really like about Photovoice is that, you know, I provide cameras to my participants, and I can talk a little bit more specifically about that. So it's not like some participants have cameras and others don't. It's really important that everybody is sort of using the same equipment and the same tools. And that could just be smartphones as well. But that's a very important element of Photovoice that I think needs to be present. Okay, last one here in terms of my approach is that, you know, kids need time for personal reflection. And, you know, this is probably one of the key concepts of Photovoice, in my opinion, is, that reflection is, or listening to someone talk about their photos, and also giving them an opportunity to provide feedback for other participants' photos, is one that provides tremendous amounts of acknowledgement and validity to not only the individual, but the collective, the group, and then ultimately helps to inform the objectives or the theme that you're working on as a group. So, so we can talk a little bit about that as well. And then lastly, my belief that kids or people we're always searching for meaning in our lives. And, the sort of the element of Photovoice, or maybe almost like the philosophy of Photovoice, is that, that it's grounded in critical consciousness, right? It's, the belief that there's, that we can strive for a deeper understanding of the way the world works, right? And that we do that through dialogue, and that photographs, taking photographs and sharing them, helps to stimulate that dialogue, and help to identify maybe some commonalities or some differences or some challenges that we all face when working collectively towards a particular objective. Okay, so there we go. Okay, so some of the what I wanted to do is kind of highlight these Photovoice elements, and how they inform my practice. And I will go through these. I won't spend too much time because you can also read them as I'm speaking. But participant engagement, if you're working with a group of people, I think it's really your duty as the facilitator and the educator to make sure that your participants are maintained, or they have sustained involvement in the project. So you have to figure out ways to make sure that they're connecting, with each other, and then ultimately that their work helps to connect them on a deeper level with maybe their families or their friends or the community at large. And so it's kind of like, it's really your role to begin to foster these relationships. And moving on, self-expression, you have to encourage participants to share their ideas. This is the time and the space for them to do that, right? And there are specific ways in which you can encourage them to open up a little bit more about their own ideas. I mean, a lot of kids come from, or maybe even our own upbringing, we have this notion that there's like a right and a wrong answer. And sometimes we're hesitant to share our ideas. And you really have to kind of create an environment where, your participants feel more comfortable doing so. And Photovoice definitely helps with that. Okay, so let me just move to the next one here for you. When my kids were small, I was doing extensive reading about, what they call 21st century skills. I was really curious about that. And I was looking for those things in my own kids and trying to find ways in which I could help them strengthen and hone those skills. And as you can see here, critical thinking as well as creative skills are, also things that can be strengthened by certain concepts of Photovoice. So here we have critical thinking skills like observation, conceptualization, reflection, application, analyzation, and then with the creative skills, as you can read here as well. One key thing for me is the new ideas, right? Using your imagination, and also, validating unique perspectives. So I think Photovoice again can definitely help you look for these things in your participants. And then also, again, social action. When I work in community and when I work with kids, I always try to make sure there's some component of the project that perhaps will allow them to work outside of like the workshop space that we may have, even if we're working online, which I've been doing increasingly now. And then also giving them an opportunity to showcase their work, their photographs and their work to not only their families, but also, again, maybe with the community at large. And then collaboration. I think this is, lastly, collaboration. One of the values of participatory photography it's that it gives participants your participants control over the process or the program, right? We talked a little bit about brainstorming and the importance of brainstorming and theme development, and that how that brainstorming allows participants some control over how their work is actually presented. And also along the way, you're sort of looking that the collaboration is one in which promotes sort of communication and cooperation. And those are skills as a facilitator that takes some time, but it should be a goal, that your participants feel autonomous. They feel like that their voice, their individual voice is heard, but also that they're open to hear other people and what other people have to say as well. Okay. So what I've done here is, when I started out teaching photography, I almost knew from the very beginning that I didn't want to just run sort of like photo basic workshops just to teach like technical skills or basic creative skills. I knew that I wanted to do something a bit beyond that, if it's I'll say that, beyond that. And I started working in my kids' school when they were very young, and I would just offer sort of workshops at no cost, working with my kids in their school environment. But that has grown, and that's been almost like 10 years ago I started. And that as I began to do that and to learn more about photo voice and other methods like literacy through photography, which is something I also feel works well with photo voice. As I began to do a bit of my own research into how I could integrate those things into my program, I found that I was able to really feel okay working not only in schools and libraries, but in like you can see here, I've worked in recreation centers that work with sometimes underserved, in underserved areas with children and youth. I've also, you could also begin to work in shelters, community health centers, or organizations, advocacy organizations. I'm increasingly beginning to work in the past couple of years with mental health organizations and with individuals with various abilities, both intellectual and developmental abilities. And that's an exciting sort of development on my front that I hope to be able to share maybe with you and others in the future. And then here in Toronto, we have a lot of newcomers and refugees, immigrants, and a lot of community centers that help support those communities. And, you know, I am often contacted by these community centers, specifically looking for ways in which we can use photography to promote participation in a lot of their programs. So I just offer this here as something that you could do as well with your work as photography educators. There's so many different types of communities that you can work with in a really fulfilling way with Photovoice. Okay, so these are just some more specific examples of some of the Photovoice-inspired projects that that I've worked with over the past 10 years. And I'll just go through them somewhat quickly. I'll just sort of mention the essence of each of the projects just to sort of give you an idea of some of the things that you may be able to do where you live and with the communities that you hope to work with. So I have worked with, Regent Park Seniors Photovoice Project. Regent Park here in Toronto is a community that has gone under like I think it's like a $2 billion revitalization. And so I worked with seniors that were already very active in a community center called the Art Heart Community Art Center. And we did a Photovoice-inspired project where I taught the seniors about photography, you know, taking pictures, and then they went out to photograph their community. And then we ultimately did a really fantastic photo exhibit in a really beautiful new sort of art center that they built in Regent Park. So you can see one of the participants here with the photographs in the back. And then also we printed, part of the funding that we got was to print these amazing like trifolds brochures that were also displayed and given to the participants, showcasing their photographs. I've worked quite a bit in libraries across the city, working mainly with children. And I'm fortunate enough to sort of live in a city where there is quite a bit of funding that's given to teaching artists to run arts-based programming. And so I love working with children and in libraries. And I'm happy to answer any specific questions that you might have about that afterwards. And then work with youth. I don't work as much with youth, but when I do, I definitely try to design a program that has Photovoice elements in it for sure. Okay, let's see. And another really amazing project that I worked with was the Healthy Arts for Seniors Cookbook. So I worked with 2 or 3 different communities. The first community was with Mandarin speaking seniors, so adults 55 and over. And then last year I worked with the Tamil community of women, many who were recent newcomers to the city. And the objective here was actually to take pictures for a cookbook that would feature their recipes from their country of origin. But we also did a lot of photography workshops where we taught the participants how to take pictures, and all the pictures in the book were photographs that they took. And so this was a bit trickier in terms of, actually it wasn't trickier, it was just that I was fortunate enough to have enough time to work with these participants so that I could fully realize the elements of Photovoice. That was really important to me. So I knew that I was given enough funding and enough time to work with these amazing participants. And then moving on, these are the last 2, working increasingly, as I mentioned, with individuals with various developmental and intellectual abilities. In this case, with the West Toronto Keys to Inclusion, I did like a weekly, I want to say like, I don't want to say after school, but it was like they would meet almost 3 times a week. And then I would meet them towards the end in the afternoon. And again, it was very new to me, but I was, I suppose, very, maybe a little surprised that I had to tailor my program a little bit, but not a lot. I could still sort of facilitate Photovoice with this community in the same, almost the same way I would with other communities. And I find this is fascinating for me, and I'm hoping to maybe do a bit work more with communities, these types of communities, so that I can maybe try to figure out why it works so well even with these communities. And I didn't have to do too much tweaking, or I didn't really have to leave out too much. You know, I could still sort of do the same type of brainstorming and theme development, you know, with this community as well. And then lastly, working in community, and this one was for working with a housing community. Their where they live, their social housing was being taken down and being replaced by condominiums, basically, some affordable housing. And so I worked with this community to sort of document what it was like to live in Somerville. I hear now that this happened during COVID, so some components of this project didn't really come to fruition the way we had hoped. But what I heard was that a lot of the photos that they took during this project are actually now being displayed, publicly displayed, along the perimeters of the new infrastructure that's being built. So, like, let's say you're walking up along the street and you'll see the signs, you know, stating that the building is being built, new building is being built, and they've basically done a photo exhibit along those perimeters. I haven't been able to see it quite yet, but I hope to soon. Okay, so Stephanie, let me see what time. Oh, I'm not going to show the videos. I have 2 videos that you're welcome to visit on my website. If you want to get maybe a more sort of dimensional view of what it was like to work with the Regent Park Seniors project, as well as with the library program, I have 2 really, really lovely videos on my website that will give you more insight into how those programs actually impacted those participants and the communities that I worked in. So I invite you to take a look at those videos. I think it will take up too much time here. Okay, so what I bring with me. So I always bring digital cameras to all of my programs. I know this might be a challenge for some of you. I did receive funding quite early on and was able to purchase some sort of bridge cameras. I think the Nikon Coolpix series, and I purchased 10 cameras, and I still have those cameras and I still use them. But now increasingly, if you don't have you know, funding to do that, you know, you can work with smartphones. You know, I increasingly am working online and people are just using their smartphones. It gets a bit trickier if they don't have a smartphone, but you know, I guess that's another topic. I also bring portable printers with me. The ones that you see here are actually, they don't make this model anymore, but they're called the Canon Selfie. And you're always welcome to email me if you want more specific information about the equipment that I bring. I'm happy to provide that for you. I do use them because that allows participants to take pictures and print them out and share them. And there's also that immediate gratification that works really well. It's fun. participants love to print. I mean, nowadays, like it's, that tangible aspect is really missing from a lot of the work that we may be doing. And this is crucial for me when I'm working in person with community. And then I bring everything else. So when I work with community agencies, they know, I tell them, you don't have to worry about anything. I bring everything with me. And like I said, you can always ask me specific questions about that and how that works. But it's really important when you're working with community, that you sort of take the burden off of them. And then, you make sure that you have everything that you need to run the program the way that you really need to. Okay, so let's see. I'm gonna kind of whiz through this. Okay, so let's explore how I do the following: how we take photos, discuss photos, and exhibit photos. Let me just see. I feel like well, we'll just move over this way. So how do we take photos using Photovoice Elements? So in Photovoice, and for me as well, it's very important that participants learn the basics of camera use or how to use a camera. And so I do spend some time teaching them how to use the cameras properly and to their advantage. So that's very important. And this is early on when we talk about taking photos, these are just some of the fundamentals that you can read here that are forefront in my practice. So, teaching participants about vantage points so that they can learn how to take pictures from different angles and explore different perspectives, elements of design, how they can use elements of design to actually create more interesting images of familiar things to them. We talk a little bit about light and how they can, understanding how light can help set a mood, tell a story, add some, drama impact to our photos. And then ultimately thinking about what we include in a picture, in a frame. How do we compose so that what's in the image is will help to communicate a particular idea or story. So those are some of the things that I build into my program design. And then I try to use the Photovoice elements to help with the flow of that instruction. So I am sorry, I guess I don't want to go over, so I'll go through these a little bit quicker. So now that they've taken their photos, how do we discuss our photos collectively? And this is, again, very crucial to a Photovoice-inspired program. It's very important that you give participants an opportunity to explain why they took the photo and to show and share, basically, and also to hear how they may be viewed by others, so other participants. So this is an opportunity for you to foster that discussion, to facilitate that discussion, so that you're creating an environment where interpretation, like various interpretations, are listened to, right? Because sometimes we don't want to give feedback, and sometimes we don't want to hear feedback, right? So it's kind of your role as a facilitator to create an environment where people are more comfortable doing that. And so here are some quick things that I'm looking for when we discuss photo. The intention of the photographer or the participant, what are they trying to say with their photo? Encouraging participants to look closer and deeper at images so that they can begin to identify some of the things that they see, and also try to infer meaning from what they see. And then we talked about interpretation, being open to interpretation and feedback from your peers. And And then also this is where the questioning begins, right? Like, we're asking ourselves, or you're encouraging your participants to ask themselves, why was, the image composed or framed the way it was? What do we think is what do we think is happening outside of the image, outside of the frame? So these are some skills that you'll need, or that Photovoice will help you hone those skills when you're facilitating a discussion with your group. Okay, so finally, how do we exhibit photos using Photovoice Elements? Again, I know with Photovoice, the whole purpose of Photovoice is basically to be able to affect some sort of change. And it's true that, I'm always looking for how we can affect some sort of change, whether within the group itself or outside of the group, right? Maybe with their community at large. So you have to get them to a point where their photos are, they should be, I don't want to say good enough, but they should align with the participants' intentions, so that when they show their work and they showcase their work, that they feel proud of their work and they feel that they are making a change, or that their work is validated in some way. Their perspectives are validated, acknowledged. They're going to be seen by other people, and people are going to ask questions. They're going to be curious about them. And so participants, your participants should be, they should be an integral part of how you exhibit your photos. So again, you're brainstorming, how do we want to show our images? What images are we going to choose? How are we going to mount them? How are we going to frame them? What space are we going to show them in? Will our photos include photo captions? Are we going to have maybe some stories or some narratives, or maybe some poetry, or are we going to have some audio components? Is it going to be sort of mixed art, or how, what are the levels here? What do we want to do? What type of funding do we have to do the things that we want to do? And then ultimately you're thinking about how you as a facilitator will frame the project. So it's your role to provide that project description and to collect all those pieces, and then help the participants display them in ways in which they have some input. Let's see here. And so lastly, on the outline is, how can you measure the impact of your program? And how can Photovoice Elements help you do that? So it's I know with Photovoice, it's very crucial to monitor and evaluate the process and what's happening in your when you're working with your participants. So how do I do that? That may be not so much different. It's different in the sense that I usually don't get the funding that requires a research component. I'm not always using Photovoice Elements and for the purpose of presenting this material to policymakers or change makers or stakeholders. That's usually not something that's something that I'm responsible for doing. Because that's not the intent of the program, and also maybe because it's not a research project, or I didn't get enough funding to do something like that. So how can you do it if that's not the case for you? So first and foremost, that front end evaluation, so to speak. You have to know why you're going into a community. Like, how did you establish the need for your participants? What community are you going to be working with? How are you going to engage community? So you want to know those things before you even begin your program. And then also you as a facilitator, what was important to you? Did the program meet or exceed your expectations? You as the facilitator, that's very important. And it's something that you should you should be happy. You should hope that you met your own goals and objectives for the program, because sometimes it's really just you're the only one. It's not like you have a whole team of people that you're working with. So it's important that that you're happy with the outcome. And then also your participants. So how can they help you determine the impact that the program has had? So you can do this a few different ways. Like you can, ask them to fill out a survey, or you can ask them to write testimonials. You can just ask them, you can just simply ask them, like, so what new skills did you gain? Do you feel more connected to the community, to your community? And you can just sort of gauge their emotional states at the end of a program. For example, when I worked with the seniors doing the cookbook, I mean, obviously we had this beautiful cookbook that we were so proud to be a part of. And so it was apparent that everybody was quite pleased with the work that they invested in the program. And then ultimately, if you did get some funding and you're working with certain communities, you are responsible for the program reports. So knowing about Photovoice can actually help you with that last sort of tidbit, thing that you need to do when you get money is, how are you going to assess the program? This is like your final summative assessment. Did the program reach your goals and objectives? Now remember, because you're now aware of how to use Photovoice Elements, it's easier for you to express how it did that. It's easier for you to document how you've done that. And that's why it's been really helpful for me to continue to learn about Photovoice and the ways in which Photovoice has helped me go from point A to point C within the journey of any particular program that I'm working with. Okay. So that's it. I'm done talking. I do, if you want to look at this later, you can sort of just look at some images that I put in a photo gallery just to kind of give you a visual sense of some of the communities and individuals that I worked with. You can look at those a little bit later. And I have some links here for other resources that you may be interested in exploring. I included these visual thinking strategies and literacy through photography because I feel that they are really such great complements to a Photovoice project. And so I would encourage you to look into those things as well. And then ultimately, I'm available at any time if you want to contact me through these, my social media, outlets. I'd be happy to hear from you, answer any questions that you have. Yeah, I'd love to help you if you're struggling in any way with your programs or if you need additional insight. So that's it, I'm done. So I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have. And thank you for listening to me.
Thank you so much, Diana. That was great. Thank you. And a lot of resources in there. And we'll make sure to share these slides afterwards. So you all have those. There were a couple questions about all other materials that you provide and your sources of funding. I don't know, these aren't short questions, but if you want to do those, and maybe that's a follow-up conversation as well.
Yeah, well, I can speak very briefly to that. As I mentioned, okay, sources of funding. Well, initially when I first started working, I was working in schools and libraries. And so I had a fee. I would charge a fee for that. And so that, I had a fee structure and I would work with those schools or libraries that could pay me, basically. I mean, if they couldn't pay me, it was really hard for me to do it because I needed money for materials and things like that. And so I kind of hustled. I mean, I still kind of, initially I hustled in the sense that I would approach schools and say, look, I have this great program and I think that you should bring me into your school. And that worked, it worked. And now sources of funding, so my main sources of funding I've been able to obtain in affiliation with community organizations. So it's been really important for me to develop those relationships with certain community organizations. And I've done effectively to the point where now they contact me every year and they say, we got this funding, we want to run this program, can you help us design a program? And I know that they have the funding, and I've been able to demonstrate the effectiveness of my programs to the extent that they want me to come back. And Photovoice has been very key to that, to my success, I'll have to say. And so aligning, I think trying to just like reach out to community organizations that might be able to give you that funding, so that like grant writing is like, I've done it, I have not always been successful as an individual. If you, let's say maybe you have like a photo type festival or educational type festival, maybe you could see if you could align yourself with them and offer them some program, and then they can give you the funding that you need. Yeah, so those are a few ideas. Yeah, okay, let me see. Are there any other questions? Let's see, I'm trying to look at the chat as well, but all the other materials that I bring. So aside from the cameras and the portable printers, I will always have like lots of cardstock print. I have to make sure that I have cartridges for the printers so that we can print out the pictures. I have like lots of things that like a teacher would have, like glue sticks, pens, pencils, or scissors, basic sort of art class materials, especially when it like working with kids, right? Because everything is really hands-on, and they like to color and cut and do all these things with their pictures. And so they can't do that if they don't have the materials to do it with. So basic like dollar store type things that I go and I just bring like, you know, buckets full of these things. So let's see. I don't know if there's any other questions, Stephanie, happy to answer them.
That's all I see in the chat for now.
Okay.
And your contact info is up there. As I said, we'll be sharing the recording, and we'll share the slides afterwards so you have the reference. We thank everyone for joining us today.
Yes, thank you so much. Yeah, yes, please contact me if you need anything at all. And nice to see some familiar. Hi, Erica. Nice to see you. Okay.